Hello everyone, and welcome to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video, I want to talk about the final topic in dealing with the interactions of matter. And if you think back to our examples, we've talked about when energy hits an object, it can be reflected, transmitted, or absorbed. And we've sort of shown that the most, I'm using this word lightly here, the most important part is that reflection, because that reflection scales to radiance with the top of atmosphere radiance and surface radiance, and then we can incorporate the irradiance in to get reflectance or percent reflectance. Now, what I want to do now is I want to talk about sort of the other side of that. And this is going to be a little bit of almost like a geometry exercise in a way. And in some ways, I think it has to do with this idealistic conception that we have with remote sensing. And that is, let's assume for a second here that we have a nice flat surface, which I've drawn here, this nice flat surface. And let's assume that we have some incoming radiation, right? So we have irradiance, okay? So when this energy hits the surface, we've said that some portion of it is reflected off. And up to this point, we've sort of drawn it in a stylistic way to just sort of go off in some direction, right? And then we have a sensor up here, right? We have a sensor up here that detects that radiation coming in. And we've said, okay, well, this is reflection, right? And we have this happening on the Earth's surface, we have that happening in the atmosphere, blah, 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 blah. But we've artistically stylized this point of contact right here to just be, it comes in and it goes out. And as with so many things in life and in remote sensing, what happens right here is a lot more complicated than that. And we've made some assumptions, quite frankly, with what happens right here. And so what I want to do is I want to actually erase this here, keeping as best we can our straight line. And I want to diagram out a couple of things that can happen. So let's assume for a second that we had the energy coming in. All right, so we're going to redraw. We have energy coming in, bouncing off like that. Right? It all came in one direction and it all left in one direction. Right? This is what's called specular reflection. And to sort of title this section in our notes, we're going to be talking right now about the types of reflection. Right, types of reflection. So this is the case that we've sort of been artistically rendering, but this does happen, right? Mirrors are a great example of this. Calm water is a great example of this, where the irradiance comes in one angle and it leaves all or most of it leaves at another angle. Right, so we would call this type of reflection specular. Right, specular reflection. Specular reflection. This is when the radiance radiance is the energy that is leaving the system, right? The outgoing radiation is radiance. Radiance leaves in one direction. Right, we're not going to go through, the laws that govern the angles and all that kind of stuff. Basically, I just want you to realize that specular reflection means the irradiance comes in at one direction and the radiance leaves in one direction. And this is stylistically what we've been drawing, but it's actually relatively rare, right? Water does this. That's why if you look at the water, depending on where the sun is, sometimes the water will hurt your eyes to look at, and other times it will appear very dark, right? That's because the energy coming in is hitting the water and it's leaving in one direction. So depending on where your eye is relative to that direction, the water could appear really dark or really bright. That's specular reflection. That's one way. Right? We could go on the other end of the spectrum. So we're going to jump all the way down to, we're going to jump all the way down to here, and we're going to do this one in red again, because I don't want you to get confused by color here. All right, so we have the energy coming in, and we have it leaving. Right, or the radiance is being reflected evenly. All right, so in this case, this is called Lambertian. Lambertian reflection. Right, Lambertian reflection. And in the case of Lambertian reflection, right, the radiance leaves equally in all directions. Now, we draw stylistically specular reflection because it's easier for us to think about when we draw things. And in remote sensing, we tend to actually assume Lambertian, right, that it doesn't matter what angle we look at, that we're going to get the same radiance all the time. And that's usually not the case either, right? So some things exhibit closer to Lambertian, some things are more specular. But the idea here is that most things, right, let's take, just so we can sort of keep track of things here. Right, most things do something more like this. Right, it hits the surface. Some goes this way, some goes that way, a little bit goes this way, maybe a little bit goes this way. Right. Now, I'm hesitant to use the words I'm going to use, but this is called diffuse. D-I-F-F-U-S-E, diffuse reflection. Right, diffuse reflection. And we're going to put, this is going to be the most common. Right, and in diffuse reflection, you can see we have some going up, we have some going this way, some going that way, some going that way. But you can see, assuming that these arrows are magnitude, right, as opposed to Lambertian, where they're all more or less the same length. In diffuse, right, it's really almost random. So the way I typically define diffuse is neither Lambertian nor specular. And I'm hesitant to use the word, but I often find it most convenient to call it random. And what's important is this is the most common, right? The surfaces are going to tend to have some directionality, but it's not all in one direction. And it certainly isn't even in all directions. It's going to have somewhere in between, and that's called diffuse reflection. Right? So what I want to do now is I want to explain to you why, from a remote sensing perspective, we care about these different types of reflection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do that in a separate video. So for right now, we're going to stop. I want you to take a minute to think about these different types of reflection. Maybe see if you can think ahead as to why we might care. And as always, if you have any questions, please stop the video, go back, rewatch the part you're confused about, and please reach out. Thank you.